Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Hope had spent the morning walking through the halls of Forrester Creations, her heels clicking against the marble floors, each step a reminder of her own accomplishments and the life she had painstakingly built. But today there was a storm in her heart, one that even her poised demeanor could not hide. She had heard whispers, the kind that spread like wildfire in the corridors of power, about Steffy's latest designs for the upcoming Forrester Fashion Gala. Whispers that suggested Steffy had intentionally tried to overshadow Hope, to reclaim the spotlight that Hope had enjoyed for so long. And Hope, who had always prided herself on her composure, felt a surge of anger she hadn't felt in years. It was personal. It was familiar. It was war. Steffy, on the other hand, had been in her office, reviewing sketches with a meticulous eye, her mind sharp, her patience thin. She had worked tirelessly to build her reputation, to carve out her place in a world that constantly pitted her against Hope, against Ridge, against anyone who questioned her talent. Steffy's eyes glimmered with determination as she realized that the upcoming gala was her chance not just to shine, but to assert dominance over the very person who had long been her rival. And in that moment a memory flashed across her mind. Every instance where Hope had somehow managed to edge her out, every glance that said, "You're second, Steffy." It fueled her, a wildfire in her chest, and she knew this was her moment. The tension reached its peak when the two women met in the design studio. It started innocuously enough, a polite greeting, the kind they had exchanged countless times over the years, but with undertones sharp enough to slice through steel. Hope's smile was measured, almost fragile, but her eyes betrayed the storm brewing beneath. Steffy's nod was curt, confident, and just enough to indicate she knew exactly what was coming. Words were exchanged, careful, calculated, loaded with history and innuendo. Each sentence was a strategic maneuver, each glance a veiled threat. The air around them seemed to crackle, an invisible current of rivalry and resentment. It wasn't long before the conversation escalated. Hope, always the diplomat, tried to navigate the tension with grace, suggesting collaboration, offering peace, but Steffy, sensing weakness, struck with the precision of a seasoned competitor. "You know, Hope, sometimes I wonder if you really belong in the spotlight," Steffy said, her voice silky but laced with venom. "Not everyone can handle the pressure of true success. Some are better suited to standing behind others." Hope's reaction was immediate, a flash of hurt followed by controlled fury. "Steffy," she replied, her tone sharp, her gaze unwavering. "I've worked just as hard as anyone here, and I've earned every opportunity. Don't think I'll back down just because you feel threatened." The verbal sparring continued, each woman testing the other, probing for weakness, each word a calculated strike in a game that neither intended to lose. But this was not just about work. It was about legacy, pride, and the unspoken understanding that in their world victory was everything. Their rivalry had always been a tangled web of family ties, romantic entanglements, and professional ambition, and now it was being dragged into the open, a public spectacle that drew the attention of everyone at Forrester Creations. Meanwhile, Ridge Forrester watched from his office, torn between admiration for both women and frustration at the destruction their feud could cause. He had always tried to mediate, to find a balance, but the wounds between Hope and Steffy ran deeper than he had ever realized. Ridge remembered the early days, the heartbreak, the secrets, the betrayals, and he knew that history had a way of repeating itself if left unchecked. He wondered how long he could stand by as the tension escalated, knowing that sooner or later, someone was going to make a move that couldn't be taken back. As the day wore on, the studio became a war zone of subtle maneuvering. Designers whispered behind closed doors, allies and friends picked sides, and every decision, every critique, every compliment became a potential weapon in the escalating battle. Hope and Steffy were aware of the stakes, aware that the outcome could redefine their positions not just in the company, but in the eyes of the world. And yet, neither woman showed any sign of backing down. The conflict spilled over into their personal lives as well. Liam, caught in the crossfire, felt torn between the two women he had loved again, and yet never truly understood how to navigate the intensity of their rivalry. He watched as Hope and Steffy's animosity grew, recognizing the same stubborn pride he had once tried, and failed, to mediate. Liam's heart ached for the past, for what was lost, for the love that had always seemed just out of reach. He knew that the upcoming gala would be a pivotal moment, one that could change everything, and he feared the fallout that would inevitably follow. Meanwhile, other family members felt the ripple effects of the feud. Brooke, ever the peacemaker in some instances, found herself pulled into the tension, struggling to maintain her composure while silently hoping the women could find common ground. She remembered all too well the pain of rivalry, the heartache, the sense of helplessness when people you love clash with ferocity that seems impossible to quell. Eric, too, felt the strain, his patience tested as he watched generations collide over issues that seemed simultaneously trivial and catastrophic. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown. Invitations to the gala had been sent, the designs finalized, the arrangements meticulous, but beneath the surface, the tension was palpable. Hope and Steffy both knew that this event was more than a celebration of fashion. It was a battleground where every glance, every step on the runway, every word in conversation could shift the balance of power. They would not simply participate. They would fight, in ways subtle and overt, for recognition, for pride, for victory. The day of the gala arrived with a mix of anticipation and dread. Guests arrived in elegant attire, unaware of the undercurrents of rivalry that threatened to disrupt the evening. The lighting, the music, the atmosphere, all carefully orchestrated, now seemed like a stage for confrontation. Hope and Steffy arrived separately, each radiating confidence, yet each aware that the other's presence was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown across the room. Photographers captured their every move, unaware that the images would later reflect a deeper, more personal battle than anyone could imagine. The tension reached a crescendo as the runway show began. Models paraded down the catwalk, showcasing Hope's and Steffy's designs, the crowd captivated by the elegance and innovation. But beneath the glamour, the rivalry simmered, an invisible fire that threatened to consume everything. Every compliment given to one was perceived as a slight to the other, every admiring glance a provocation. And when the final pieces were revealed, the audience erupted in applause, but the two women stood poised, calculating, each measuring the impact of the other's success. Backstage, the confrontation was inevitable. Hope and Steffy faced each other once more. This time with no filters, no pretense of civility. The words flew like daggers, sharp, precise, cutting through the years of history, pain, and competition. "You always have to be the center of attention, don't you?" Hope accused, her voice steady but heated. Steffy's lips curled into a knowing smile. "And you always think you deserve it more than anyone else," she shot back, her tone equally unwavering. Their conversation escalated. A symphony of tension, pride, and unspoken emotion. It was more than a rivalry. It was a clash of identities, of what each woman represented in the world of Forrester Creations, in the lives of those around them, and in their own hearts. By the end of the evening, alliances had shifted, loyalties had been tested, and the balance of power had subtly, but unmistakably, changed. The rivalry between Hope and Steffy was no longer just an undercurrent. It had erupted into full-blown conflict, leaving no room for compromise, no possibility of retreat. The consequences of this battle would echo through every interaction, every design, every relationship, setting the stage for new confrontations, heartbreaks, and triumphs. In the quiet aftermath, as the lights dimmed and the guests departed, Hope and Steffy each retreated to their respective spaces, minds racing, hearts pounding. The war was far from over. Old wounds had been reopened, new battles were already forming, and in the world of Forrester Creations, where ambition and emotion collided, there was no room for peace. Only the next confrontation awaited, and both women knew without a shadow of a doubt that when it came to rivalry, neither would ever surrender. The war was back, and it was just beginning. Hope arrived early, her usually radiant expression muted by a simmering determination. She had barely slept, haunted by Steffy's last words at the gala, those sharp, deliberate taunts that lingered in her mind like a wound refusing to heal. Hope paced her office, reviewing sketches, fabric swatches, and notes from the previous day's show. On the surface, she appeared calm, professional, collected, but inside, her mind was a whirlwind of strategy, memories, and raw emotion. Every decision she made now had weight. Every interaction could be a test of resolve, a battlefield maneuver. She reminded herself that Steffy's ambition was formidable, But Hope had resilience forged in her own history of personal and professional battles. She had survived heartbreaks, betrayals, and public scrutiny before. This was just another chapter in a long story of perseverance. Steffy, in contrast, had begun her morning with a ritualistic precision, moving from one task to another with an unshakable focus. She checked her designs, revisited her sketches, and rehearsed her talking points for upcoming meetings. Her victory at the gala had been subtle yet undeniable, and though she had garnered applause, she knew the real war was far from over. Every interaction with Hope, every encounter at the office, could escalate into a confrontation. Steffy thrived in this tension. It fueled her creativity and sharpened her instincts. Yet beneath the surface, a flicker of unease lingered. She knew Hope was a formidable opponent, not just professionally but emotionally. There was a fire in Hope that could ignite quickly, and Steffy understood that one misstep could reverse any advantage she had won. The two women's paths inevitably crossed in the studio as the day progressed. Their brief, almost imperceptible glances at each other carried the weight of the last night's confrontation. Neither spoke at first. Words were unnecessary. The tension was palpable, an electric charge that could spark at any moment. Behind the polite exchanges of morning greetings, a silent duel played out, each assessing the other's mood, mindset, and potential vulnerabilities. It was an intricate dance, choreographed over years of rivalry, and both women had mastered the steps to perfection. Liam arrived shortly after, stepping into the studio with an unsteady sense of awareness. He had been a spectator to the tensions for years, a participant in some instances, but never fully able to reconcile his loyalty, his affection, and his desire for peace. Today, though, he felt the weight of the situation more acutely than ever. Watching Hope and Steffy navigate their silent war, he recognized the same pride and stubbornness that had drawn him to both women in the past. He also understood that any intervention would need delicate precision. One wrong word could trigger an emotional explosion that might ripple through the entire company. Brooke, ever the maternal figure and peacemaker, observed the unfolding dynamics from her office. She had spent years trying to navigate the complex web of relationships at Forrester Creations, and though she had seen many conflicts resolve, none had the intensity of this rivalry. Brooke's heart ached for both women, but she also knew that the fire between Hope and Steffy was unlikely to subside without a confrontation that could either clarify or devastate the balance between them. She considered stepping in, attempting to mediate, but she hesitated, understanding that sometimes battles needed to reach their own natural climax before resolution could occur. As the day unfolded, subtle tactics began to emerge. Hope strategically positioned herself in meetings, asserting influence without overt confrontation, while Steffy countered with her own maneuvers, ensuring her designs, ideas, and opinions were impossible to ignore. Both women were aware of the silent observers, the designers, models, and assistants who noted every gesture, every tone, and every expression. Loyalty and alliances shifted in response to these undercurrents, creating a delicate ecosystem where influence was as much about perception as it was about skill. The confrontation escalated further during a design presentation in the main studio. Hope unveiled her latest collection for the upcoming runway show, her attention to detail meticulous, her vision bold yet graceful. Steffy observed silently, noting every element, every choice, every technique. When she presented her own collection, she added subtle flourishes and innovations designed to draw attention, highlighting her strengths while casting a comparative shadow over Hope's work. The room responded with murmurs of admiration, and in that instant, the silent duel became public. The tension between Hope and Steffy was no longer a private matter. It was a spectacle, drawing the attention of colleagues, friends, and family alike. Liam, standing at the edge of the room, felt torn. He admired Hope's grace, her poise, her unyielding determination, but he also recognized the cunning and ingenuity in Steffy's approach. Both women had legitimate claims to success, but the rivalry had now transcended merit. It had become personal, emotional, and strategic. Liam's heart ached as he realized that his presence, his opinion, even his attempt at intervention could fuel the conflict further. He retreated to a corner, silently hoping that the intensity of their passion could somehow be channeled toward resolution rather than destruction. Meanwhile, Ridge, observing from a distance, felt frustration mounting. He understood both women intimately, knew their strengths and weaknesses, and feared the consequences of unchecked rivalry. Ridge had always believed in balance, in the delicate art of mediation, yet here in the crucible of ambition, pride, and history, he realized that external intervention might be futile. This was a battle that Hope and Steffy had to navigate themselves, a war of wills that could either forge mutual respect or deepen the chasm between them irreparably. The dynamics extended beyond Forrester Creations. News of the gala and the rivalry had begun to circulate in social circles, attracting attention from media, clients, and industry insiders. Rumors, speculation, and commentary amplified the tension, transforming what might have been a contained dispute into a matter of public intrigue. Hope and Steffy were no longer simply rivals. They were symbols of ambition, resilience, and personal power, each embodying qualities that drew admiration and scrutiny in equal measure. As evening approached, Hope and Steffy were summoned to a high-level meeting with Eric, Brooke, and key members of the design team. The agenda was ostensibly about strategy and upcoming projects, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. Both women were acutely aware that their interactions during this meeting could have long-lasting consequences. The room became a stage, the conversation a chess game, each comment layered with intent, each suggestion a potential leverage point. Hope spoke with measured confidence, her words chosen to assert influence without aggression. Steffy countered with equal precision, framing her ideas as indispensable while subtly undermining Hope's authority. The tension was a living entity in the room, a palpable force that even the most seasoned professionals could not ignore. By the end of the meeting, no resolution had been achieved, but the stakes had been clarified. Hope and Steffy both recognized the precarious balance of power, the delicate interplay of ambition, emotion, and history. They left the room with their own strategies firmly in place, fully aware that the war had entered a new phase, one where subtlety, observation, and timing would be as crucial as talent and determination. That night, both women returned to their private spaces, minds racing with plans, contingencies, and what-ifs. Hope reflected on her values, her priorities, and the integrity that had guided her career. She understood that while competition was inevitable, it was equally vital to remain true to herself and her vision. Steffy, on the other hand, considered every possible maneuver, every potential advantage, and every angle from which she could assert dominance. She thrived on strategy, on foresight, and on the adrenaline of a well-executed plan. Yet neither could ignore the emotional complexity underlying their rivalry. Beneath the professional facade was a tangled web of personal feelings, past heartbreaks, unfulfilled desires, moments of vulnerability, and the lingering presence of shared history. Both women knew that their conflict was not just about designs, applause, or prestige. It was about identity, self-worth, and the assertion of power in a world that demanded resilience and ambition in equal measure. In the days that followed, the conflict intensified. Meetings, presentations, and casual encounters became battlegrounds for dominance. Allies were tested, loyalties shifted, and the emotional stakes grew higher with each passing interaction. Hope and Steffy's rivalry became a lens through which everyone else at Forrester Creations measured their own positions, navigating alliances, friendships, and professional opportunities with heightened awareness. Liam attempted to bridge the gap, offering support to Hope, reassurance to Steffy, and moments of mediation where possible. Yet even his interventions were fraught with complexity. His affection for both women, combined with the history he shared with each, made neutrality impossible. Every word, every gesture, and every decision was scrutinized, interpreted, and sometimes weaponized. Liam's role became increasingly challenging, as he struggled to maintain harmony while respecting the independence and strength of both women. Brooke and Eric remained watchful, balancing encouragement, intervention, and guidance. Brooke, in particular, wrestled with her desire to nurture and protect, knowing that stepping in too forcefully could exacerbate the conflict. Eric, meanwhile, emphasized strategic thinking, reminding everyone that personal rivalries could have real consequences on the company's future, finances, and reputation. The entire ecosystem of Forrester Creations had been subtly transformed into a theater of tension, observation, and anticipation, where every action carried meaning far beyond its immediate context. In the midst of this, subtle alliances began to form. Designers, models, and staff aligned themselves based on admiration, loyalty, and perception of competence. Each choice influenced the flow of information, the framing of ideas, and the balance of power within the company. The rivalry between Hope and Steffy was no longer a personal matter. It had become a structural force, shaping decisions, outcomes, and even the trajectory of the brand itself. Meanwhile, both women found moments of introspection. Hope reflected on the resilience that had carried her through past challenges, reaffirming her commitment to integrity, creativity, and emotional authenticity. She knew that while the battle with Steffy was intense, her strength lay not only in skill but in her ability to remain grounded amidst chaos. Steffy, in turn, considered her own ambitions, her desire for recognition, and the legacy she wished to leave. She understood that her rivalry with Hope was a defining element of her professional identity, a measure of her own power, and a reflection of her capacity to influence, inspire, and assert control. As the narrative unfolded, it became clear that this conflict was far from transient. It was a multifaceted drama, blending personal history, professional ambition, emotional intensity, and strategic calculation. Every interaction, every design, every meeting was now layered with significance, each carrying the potential to shift perceptions, realign loyalties, and alter the trajectory of both women's lives. And yet, amidst the tension, there were glimpses of humanity, moments where both women's vulnerabilities surfaced. In private, Hope questioned the cost of rivalry, the toll it took on her relationships, her peace of mind, and her sense of self. Steffy, too, wrestled with uncertainty, the fear that her drive for dominance could isolate her from those she loved and respected. These moments of reflection revealed the complexity of their characters, the depth of their emotional landscapes, and the stakes that extended far beyond professional rivalry. The stage was set for the next escalation, one that would test the limits of patience, loyalty, and resilience. Hope and Steffy were locked in a battle where victory was defined not only by skill and creativity, but by the ability to navigate emotional complexity, influence perception, and anticipate the moves of a formidable opponent. In this arena, there were no simple solutions, no easy resolutions, and no room for complacency. As the days passed, the tension continued to mount. Every interaction carried significance. Every decision had consequences. Hope and Steffy's rivalry became a lens through which the entire Forrester universe observed ambition, power, and emotional intensity. The conflict was no longer confined to the walls of the studio. It had spilled into the lives of family, friends, and colleagues, leaving a trail of anticipation, concern, and intrigue. The war, it seemed, was far from over. And in the world of Forrester Creations, where every design, every relationship, and every gesture carried weight, Hope and Steffy knew that the next move could change everything. The rivalry had evolved, intensified, and deepened, setting the stage for a series of confrontations, revelations, and dramatic moments that would leave no one untouched. The battle lines were drawn. The strategies were set. The stakes had never been higher. And in the midst of it all, one truth remained indisputable. In the war between Hope and Steffy, there could be no neutrality, no retreat, and no certainty of victory. Only the unfolding of drama, the clash of wills, and the relentless pursuit of personal and professional dominance.